Okay, I'm just going to whiz through the idea of doing a Sward MOT test as such. It's basically a quick assessment of your fields to check how well they're carried through the winter and whether or not they're going to need any improvement as we go into the spring and summer. All I'm looking for when I'm looking at sward, first thing, percentage ryegrass. And all I'm going to do is score this on a scale of 0 to 3. If I've got no ryegrass, I'm going to score it as a 0. If I've got 80% plus ryegrass, it gets a 3. After last year's monsoon conditions, the topic of conversation is trying to repair the damage we did to swards last year, trying to remedy any compaction, trying to improve open swards so that we can maintain productivity into 2013. What I need to find out is whether or not the wet conditions we've got here are actual problems with water moving downwards, whether it's actually water coming upwards, whether it's actually a compaction issue, or whether it's merely the fact that we've got a very high clay content soil that's actually stopping, it's actually the soil texture that's stopping water moving rather than any particular damage we've done. Okay, I'm just going to have a bit of a dig here so we can find. The first thing is to take out a small block. Chuck that to one side. So I'm interested in 3 areas. I'm interested in the very surface. I'm interested in down to the barrier with the subsoil, which I'm just about hitting now at about 10 inches. And then later on I'm going to have a dig down into that subsoil and see if I've got any problems there. Okay, once you've cleared out a hole, the next thing is to try and get a clean edge on it. So I'm just going to try and lift this out as an intact block. Okay, so as I lift up, you can see we get a few natural breaks. It's absolutely sopping wet at the top. It's fairly dry, not too bad at the bottom. So let's see what we've got in between. Okay, I've got very much a root mat on the surface. 80–90% of my roots are in that top 1.5 inches. And underneath, you can see here, I've got all these brown stains, iron oxide rust deposits, which comes when your soil is wet and dry and wet and dry. So it's not permanently waterlogged, but temporarily waterlogged. What I'm looking for is these big blocks, just to see how bad the compaction is. And these blocks sit at about 3 or 4 inches. And they're not ridiculously tight, and you can see the roots are getting through them, but they are obviously stopping water moving down through the profile. Okay, and in the subsoil, I'm just looking for fractures, open spaces, clear evidence where the water's moving. I can see I've still got roots coming down here. It is tight, but there are cracks in there. But there's no doubt that's going to stop a little bit of water moving through, especially the volumes we've got recently. So I've got 2 areas of risk really. I've got the one at the top here, where I've got a compaction layer, and I've also got quite a tight subsoil. There is enough clay content in here that when we get a dry time, it will crack, it will shatter. But in the topsoil, we haven't got a lot of stones. We've got nothing there really to give it a decent amount of structure and drainage. And when it gets wet and wet and wet and never gets a break, everything gets very, very tight. So it's short of actual drainage channels that move through the top 4 or 5 inches. And then to compound things, we've then got a fairly impermeable layer underneath, so water backs up from underneath as well. So we've got water moving down very, very slowly, and we've also got water backing up from underneath. In terms of remedies, what can we do about this? You've got several options. One is you fill your hole back in, you walk away and you say, I'm going to leave it alone. It'll recover on its own. And an awful lot of soils will. If there's a decent worm content, decent clay content that'll crack and when we get a dry time, a lot of this damage that we did last year will actually recover. The next option is to say, okay, if it's surface compaction, I can maybe go through with a slitter down to about 4 inches. But that's all that's going to do is just lift that, move that 4 inches around. If you've got problems underneath, the slitter's no good to you because all it does is water just backs up and then you're back to square one very, very quickly. You can go next option a bit deeper. We could use a subsoiler type sward lifter type machine to get in at about 8–9 inches. But in many instances, it's more this subsoil that needs sorting out. So then we're looking to say, well, okay, is it more a case of getting deeper and trying to shatter some of this tighter stuff at below 10 inches? The deeper you go, the more diesel it takes, the more cost there is. What you have to consider now is return on investment. We're in a field here. What I want to know really is how much grass does it grow? How good is it? Is it worth spending money on in order to maximise yield? Are there other areas of the farm that are going to be easier to improve to get a decent return? This isn't going backwards at a rate of knots. I've still got a fair amount of ryegrass here. It might be that this isn't our place to go and spend money.